Sorry. Hey there, I'm Erica Allen, and this is New Perspectives, where we take a new look at age-old problems so that we can be freed up to shine light and ignite change. I have my friend with us today, Pastor David Schutte. He's a pastor in Buffalo, New York, and we're just going to talk about some age-old problems that he's dealt with in his life and how taking a new look, having a new perspective at those freed him up to do what God has asked him to do, to shine light and ignite change. So I'm going to let David introduce himself to us, and then we'll keep on going this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me. I believe we call it Buffalo, trying to get the positive vibes out. And I'm the pastor of Fellowship Wesleyan Church. We're in the South Towns, right next to the Bills Stadium. Kind of a good place to end up in this world in lovely sunny Buffalo.
That's
sunny
awesome.
for 3 months a year. Yeah.
Do people sound like me in Buffalo, or do they have like a little bit of a different accent than this there?
Really Midwestern. Like everyone always thinks of New York as New York City.
Yep.
And we're, a good 9 hours from New York City. I mean, it's a drive, but we're only like 3 hours from Cleveland, 3 hours from Pittsburgh, an hour and a half from Toronto. So we have that Great Lakes Midwest potluck culture way more than the New York culture per se.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. And then this one age-old problem that we have to deal with to start with. Who has the best buffalo wings in Buffalo, New York?
Bar Bill. Bar none,
Okay.
Bar Bill.
Okay.
We went to Anchor Bar, the original, the other day, and it was good. And there's a couple that are also really good, but hands down the best is Bar Bill. The problem is getting in is almost impossible. But it's where the Bills players go, so a lot of times you can catch Bills players in there. Josh Allen, when he was being recruited by the Bills, they took him there for his first meal, and he signed. And oddly enough, one of the church people took me there for my first meal, and we signed
And you
too.
signed. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of a tradition up here. Bar Bill, you sign a contract.
That's awesome. That's awesome. David's joining us today, and I just wanted him to share our theme for the month of June is Nothing is Wasted. And David is a person who in my life has just really embodied that, has really sort of just clung to this notion that God is going to be faithful and nothing that we're going through in our lives will be wasted. God will use it to redeem and restore. And so I just wonder if you might share about a time in your own life where that notion that nothing is wasted really became true for you.
But do you remember the first time we met?
Yes. At Leadership Academy, right? No.
Yes.
It was before that. It was church planting like boot camp. Remember?
But I was just there for one meal because I was in licensing.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It was a leadership academy. You're right.
Yeah, no, but we had briefly said hi, but we met at the leadership academy, and in 2018, I think, and this is where I start to lose years, but I had gone through and been in the ministry for like 10 years,
Yep.
15. No, about 10 years at that point, and things have gone well. You start to feel a little high on yourself. Everyone has speed bumps in their career, but for the most part, like everywhere I wanted to go, I was able to get. And as part of that, I was living in Florida. I got married to this woman who I met at church of all places when I was working as a youth pastor, and things seemed like they were going well. And we took some time off to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming back, just waiting on the United Methodist Church. Like, no, I love the United Methodist Church. Got my start there. Very grateful. But they don't move at a fast pace. There's a committee on everything. And just waiting for that contract to start. For whatever reason, like, in that season, my wife got, like, really anxious about everything. And she has some stuff in her family that isn't ideal. And they started speaking death into our marriage. And like, I don't want to just escape her and say everything is like her fault, their fault. Like I could have done a way better job listening, communicating, understanding their concerns. Whether they were valid or not doesn't really matter. I didn't really take the time to be a good husband necessarily.
Yeah.
But then, we got the call to like plant this church campus in Florida, and all excited. Paycheck was bigger than I thought even. Like it was just I thought we were going into an awesome season. I was like, man, This is great. We're going in this great season. Everything is going well. and we met y'all when I was in licensing school.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, that's the Allens and everyone else. And then we were supposed to meet again in September for the Leadership Academy.
Yep.
Well, like probably a month, there's a 2-month period in between. And halfway through that, not even halfway, probably a week after the first time we met, I came home and my wife said that she had an affair with somebody she worked with when I was out of town. And it was like, I don't know, like nothing ever prepared you for that. Cause you might be having some problems.
Yeah.
And, but that's kind of like a different betrayal. And then we started unwinding it and found out it wasn't just one affair. It was like multiple, and it was public, and everyone in the city that I was launching in, not everyone, but like tons of people knew about it because the guy had told everyone.
Yeah.
And, so not only was I losing my wife, but my reputation and standing in the city. And then a month later, I show up to Leadership Academy, newly single, because obviously she not only cheated, but I try to make it work, and she just walked out, and that's okay. It's for the best in a long time, but like I was a wreck.
Oh, of course.
And I remember like somebody at in my group, like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I literally have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Like this, we're doing this one way or the other because I have nothing else going in life. And so that was a crazy first season. And we started doing Leadership Academy. That was awesome. I mean, just a great group of pastors and now friends that we met. And I just remember like how, like what a messed up season that was. And this sounds weird, but the only saving grace that hit was Hurricane Irma. Remember Hurricane Irma?
I remember Hurricane Irma. We were meeting at this meeting when Hurricane Irma came through. Like we left going back home, not knowing where Hurricane Irma was going to hit, but it was like all over the news that it was headed to Florida, where we were.
And I remember everyone was going north, trying to get away from this Category 4 or 5 hurricane.
Yep.
And I was heading south right into it because I was like, whatever. If I die in a hurricane, like at least I go out, like at least it's over.
Yeah, things are terrible right now anyway. Let's drive into a hurricane.
Yeah, it can't get worse. And so I went back, and literally once the hurricane hit, from then on it was like the Rihanna song, work, 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 work.
Yeah.
And it devastated some of the areas down there. So I was doing supply runs, cleanup projects, meeting people, organizing, and just working like 80 hours a week. I just decided that the way I'm going to deal with pain is just to be so busy that I don't have to deal with pain, which is unhealthy. So like at the time, like what else? I mean, I knew what do people do. They either get like go party and go crazy, or they go to the gym, get really in shape. And so I was like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get really in shape. It's kind of why when I see somebody who's working out now, I'm like, who hurt you? It makes you want to run.
What's going on in your life?
Yeah, you want to talk about it? You got to just sit in that for a minute. And I remember, you go on trial in the Methodist Church whenever you get a divorce. Like I know it's a weird thing to say, but the DS called me out and she said, you haven't stopped to process. And so they mandatory sabbaticaled me, meaning that I had 6 weeks off, that I had to go deal with it.
Yeah.
And, it was about 6 months after the affair or 4 months after the affair that I actually went. And I've heard God speak to me twice in my life, like the audible voice of God, not just like feel the Spirit. Yep. One was like the call to ministry. And then one time I remember I went to go hike the Florida Trail because I wanted to be in nature. I wanted to be alone in nature. And on the Florida Trail, you just like, why did this happen, God? Why did this happen? There's 1,000 different theories on evil, but none of them really satisfy. And I don't think even if we knew the answer, it'd make life better. And
especially in the moment. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because like philosophy doesn't mean anything. Like it's just people's opinion.
Yep.
So some philosophy professor is dying inside when I said that, but whatever. but like I heard God say, like, you don't get to know why this happens. Just know that I've always been with you.
Mm.
And it just like, it struck me like hard that you're just not alone. Like life with Jesus isn't easier even, but you're not alone. And just having somebody there that cares, having the more or less the creator of the universe who controls all things there is nice. Like there's comfort to that, and there's hope in that. And there's a peace that finally came about at the end of that.
Yeah, I love that. You don't have to know all the whys, all the ins and outs. Just know I am with you. We looked this Sunday at the story of Joseph, and part of this Nothing is Wasted story, and his brothers who were supposed to love him and care for him. They're his family. They're the unit that's supposed to be around him to help him. They sell him, like they throw him into a hole in the middle of the desert, and then they get this bright idea, hey, let's not leave him there. Let's sell him into slavery and send him off to Egypt. They like this ultimate sort of betrayal story. And I remember sitting with it this week and thinking that exact same thing. Like, God, why would this be part of Joseph's story? Like, why is this a part of it? And the exact same thing I felt like was sort of whispered through God's Spirit. It didn't feel like the audible voice of God at that moment, but it was this sense to which I'm with you in the hurt and the pain and the isolation and the loneliness. I am with you. I was with Joseph. I was with, countless folks that we read about in the Bible, and I'm with you. And I hear you saying that too, that there's something about these wilderness moments. You were literally in the wilderness, David, when God spoke this to you. And there's something about being in the wilderness that makes us more open to hearing God's voice than in the moments where we're not quite so in the wilderness. So I hear you saying nothing is wasted, especially those wilderness moments.
Yeah, and just the time that we always say, if you've ever read, I'll always go back to Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline as the book.
Yes.
The only, like besides the Bible, it's the only book you really need for a Christian life. I'll die on that hill. I don't even care.
I love it.
And he talks about that solitude is the garden that the other spiritual disciplines grow in.
Yeah.
So like meditation's good, but meditating in my office when there's people knocking on the doors and emails and staffing issues, like that's not going to do anything. Praying is good, but if you're at the house and you've got to cook dinner or the kids or whatever, it's not going to do anything. But when you allow solitude, you allow that space for God to speak into you that you can. And it's and being shaped by God just takes time.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. And he shapes you where you're at and uses where you've gone through to make you stronger and more like him in love and righteousness.
That's so good, because I'm an American millennial who likes to put things in the microwave and zap it out, type it into Google and have the answer. And there's this sense to which I feel like, especially in the season of COVID, I learned this zapping it and it being over, or we have the answer at the end of the journey, that's not. For the first time, I really began to understand this long season of a wilderness. And there is a sense to which it doesn't zap in and out. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens literally over time.
That God speaks in still small voices, not, what does it say? It isn't in the fire. It isn't in the earthquake. It's in the gentle breeze that God speaks.
If there was somebody watching today and they've just freshly gone home and found out their spouse has cheated on them. They've just gone home and they realize they're about to head into a divorce. They've been contemplating sort of an end to a toxic or unhealthy relationship for quite some time. What word would you offer them at sort of a different part of your season now? What word would you offer to them in the middle of what they're going through right now? What would you say?
If you're like me and you've got a human side, you're going to want vengeance, just pure petty. At first it was hopelessness and it was, I want to fix this and everything else. And you can't fix somebody else. I'm not responsible for fixing my ex's family. They've got to figure that out on their own. I'm not even part of that. And it affects me, but I don't get to control it. And as somebody who's a natural fixer, That kills me. Like,
Yeah.
when you run a church and something drives you crazy, you fix it.
Yep.
It might be a hard decision. It might be very personal. But when it's a person, you're just stuck with it.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult. And then just when my ex walked, I know she had left all of her stuff and at the apartment that we had, and I just wanted to throw it on the side of the road and be like, come get it.
Yeah.
I wanted to call like my ex-father-in-law and like just curse him out for speaking death in my marriage. Like all this stuff you want to do. But there's a little line, John Maxwell says it in one of his books. I don't even know which one it is, but it's a simple line. And I don't know why it's stuck in my head, but it just simply says, no one ever regrets taking the high road. No one ever regrets taking the high road. Like, what you're going through when you're in the heat of the moment, you want to attack, you want to fix, you want to fight, you want to get vengeance, you want to do what your human emotion says. But long term, none of that's healthy. None of that's good. You're just living into the fallenness. But when you choose to always take the high road, you get to keep your side of the street clean. You get to control what you can control, and you get to control it well. So if you're like we always tell couples that are in a season of struggle, especially if someone's struggling with their spouse, you don't get to control them. You don't get to have their emotions. You don't get to have their fears, failings, any of that. You don't get to control any of that. What you get to do is keep your side of the street clean. What you get to do is take the high road, and no one ever regrets taking the high road.
I love that, because when I think of the theme, nothing is wasted, when we look back at the stories of Joseph, when I even talk to you about your story, it's what did you learn in hindsight? And for those of you who are going through this, there will be a moment where you've learned something in hindsight, but right now, the high road will not be wasted. That's what you can do right now, and that doesn't take a bit of hindsight right now. It just means taking the high road. I think that advice is rich, even for me right now. I will not regret operating, walking through the high road instead of sort of resorting to some of the natural human things that I also want to do from time to time. That's really good. Can you tell me about a time when maybe in this season you looked at the road ahead and weren't sure that you just weren't sure what was next? And like really about this moment of sort of clinging to a faith or clinging to this trust that what God was doing in the season wouldn't be wasted. Can you tell me about just a specific moment in that journey where you were like, nothing is wasted?
Yeah, it's the nice thing about having everyone know about all your business is that there's like nothing to hide.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're not covering for anyone, you're not apologizing for anyone. Everyone, there's something freeing about having your story told to everyone. And so instead of it just being this thing that like, oh, what happened, whatever, everyone knows.
Yeah.
So that was as bad as embarrassing as that was, like, hey, whatever, once it's there, it's there.
Yeah.
You're not responsible for protecting feelings or protecting people. I mean, I'm not going out trashing my ex. And again, like she had her reasons, and I've definitely learned to be a better husband in the time since. But
I really appreciate what you're saying here too, that nothing, again, when we talk about nothing is wasted, like it's probably not the way you would have chosen to tell people about your divorce. It's for everybody else to know about it, maybe even before you knew everything about it.
Most before me, which is what was crazy.
Yeah. But that somehow God even took those moments where you weren't retelling this story over and over and over again, and God used that as a process of sort of, moving you into healing and transformation.
And the great thing is, for the first time in my life, I've learned how to just sit with pain. And just as somebody who's a natural fixer, to be a natural sitter is awesome. And so when we started the campus, started the church, we just found people who needed someone to sit with them. We had people who went through loss. We went through people that went through grief share. And it was just nice to have somebody sit with you and just say like, hey, I know your life kind of sucks right now. Mine did too. It gets better and you're not alone.
I love, yes, yes.
And that's, I just, cause that's the whole thing is like, nobody needs to be fixed. People just need to be understood. And like, we had this new worship leader that was helping out. And I was telling him the other day, I was like, hey, somebody says something to you and you try to fix the problem. You didn't try to understand the concern. I was like, what you should have done is say, hey, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that this is your concern, right? And he says, right. And like, I understand where you're coming from. I understand your concern. And then he was like, what do I do then? Like, whatever you want to. He doesn't have to agree with you. He just wants to know that you care enough to listen. And that's the beauty of the people that helped me out. They weren't people with answers. They were people that were caring enough to listen. And where the church and good ministry I've learned in my life since, if you just stop and you sit and you cry with people and you listen with people, that good ministry comes out of that. Because again, it's Christianity is a team sport. Yep. Where the Spirit, two or more gathered in Jesus' name, God is there. And when you have somebody going through some drama in life and you pray over it, you just say, I understand where you're coming from. I don't know that pain, but I know what pain is. And I know you're in a rough season. Let me just sit with you. You don't try to fix them. You don't try to provide, oh, this is why God allowed this to happen. You don't say garbage like that you don't even know about. Yeah. You just sit with people and just say, I'm with you. Like, yeah, we're going to get through this together. I've been there and people have done this for me. I got through it. I think you will too. But even if you don't, I'll still be here. That's 90% of good ministry, if I'm honest.
That's so good. And I hear you saying that this season of really believing that nothing will be wasted, even in the midst of betrayal and really, really tough stuff, David. In the midst of that, God didn't waste 1 ounce of it to prepare you to literally shine light and ignite change as a pastor. Like it sounds to me like it equipped you maybe even to shine the light of Jesus in the midst of darkness better, to ignite the change, to begin to speak into people's lives in a way that promotes the kind of change God wants us to have. It, like, really beginning to look at pain in a new way allowed you to, it really freed you up to shine light and ignite change.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about this Easter, for our Easter service, is that we just made the analogy. We brought a painter on our stage, and he just started painting colors on and because I'd taken this class with this guy, and so he had us paint where is it? Somewhere in this office is in the office. He had us paint this painting, and on one side was like gold, and on the other side was blue. And I sent my sister a Snapchat of just the background, but it was upside down. She said, "Oh, you're painting a sunset on the ocean." And I was like, no, I'm painting grass on a sunny day. And so like I flipped it, and then I started adding more stuff. And then she was like, I don't see it. You just add more stuff. And all of a sudden, like that, it just all comes together. And you go, oh, this is what was going on the whole time. And with our lives, I think in my own life, where I'm at now, the pain, the affair, the just days on end where I couldn't leave my couch, like I was messed up. I remember one time I ordered Chinese food because I hadn't left my house in 2 weeks. I don't know how I didn't get fired, except I think everyone felt sorry for me. And like all of those seasons, like it was the background that God was going to paint his masterpiece on. And like now that you're leading, I'm leading this church, and I feel like it's going all right. But I would have been a terrible pastor if I had never gone through that. I would have been arrogant. I wouldn't have learned what it means to rely on Jesus alone instead of my own natural abilities. I would have been like just a jerk. And then when you have to make those tough decisions, I would have just done it with glee as opposed to like mourning tough decisions, which I think is almost a healthy thing, that you can't be handicapped by that feeling. But if you don't feel when you have to make those calls like that, then you're kind of you're a little too rough for the ministry.
Yeah, a little too rough. Yeah.
A little too rough. So it's it's to have that balance in life was all those hurts and just that public embarrassment, and just learning to stand and say like, hey, I'm a 31-year-old divorcee pastor at the time. Now I'm a 36-year-old divorcee pastor. I'm a 36-year-old divorcee pastor who my first marriage was an abysmal failure.
Yeah.
You want to come to my church? Like to be able to say that is freeing. Like, because you don't have to be perfect. If something goes wrong on a Sunday, it's like, guess what? You think that's wrong? You should hear my story. Like, I've got some stuff that's gone wrong too, but what I do know is that Jesus made it better.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. Can you defend your faith to the staunch atheist that can debate you for hours? Why would I want to? But I can tell you, I was living, I got hurt. Jesus made my life a lot better, and he can do that for you as well.
I love that. Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
And there's just a great song. Have you heard Canvas in the Clay by Pat Bennett out of House Fires?
No.
Man, it is a great song. He just says, it's a simple, you make all things work together for my future and for my good. I know that nothing has been wasted, no failure or mistake. You're an artist and a potter, and I'm the canvas and the clay. And it's just saying that those hurts, those things that you're struggling through, if you don't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that could be, and I don't want to say it's God painting the background, but that could be the background that God's going to paint his masterpiece over.
Yeah.
And the masterpiece doesn't make sense without a background.
Yeah.
It needs something to be painted on. It needs something to be worked on. And that background simply your life, including the good things, obviously your family, your faith, your friends, but also the bad things as well, that it all contributes to making that background that God's masterpiece gets put on.
Yeah, and it's not even this like God created that or made that happen, but that our God is so powerful. God can literally like create something even out of the dark blue and blacking messy stuff we bring.
And that God redeems. He doesn't create evil.
Yes.
He redeems evil. God makes all things work together for the good of those who
Yes.
love him. And when he says all things, he doesn't just mean like your sword verses that you memorized in 4th grade. He doesn't mean that time that you got baptized. He means the things that include your sin, includes your addictions, includes your hurts, your habits, your hang-ups. It includes those times that you've been deeply hurt. It includes the times that you don't go to work for 2 weeks because your life's a mess. Like all those things are redeemed because God uses all your life. But a lot of that's also allowing God to have all those parts of your life.
That is so good. That is who God is a redeeming and restoring God. But there is this sense to which we have to hand that stuff over for God to redeem and restore. And that's how we're freed up to shine light and ignite change. As we continue to sort of hand that over to the God who redeems and restores. Is there anything else you want to say to people who may want to know, like, nothing is wasted? How could I look at my life in a new way to know that? Is there one sentence you sort of want to offer them as we close up today?
Yeah, so the most ironic thing in my ministry is I've gotten into a little side hustle of doing premarital counseling. Right? It just was one of those weird things that, I went through my own divorce, so you study like, what happened, what went wrong.
Yeah.
And then it went down to just kind of doing a premarital counseling for a wedding or two and getting certified through a program or two. And now I do probably 2 or 3 couples a month I do premarital counseling with, just because it's A, I love it, it's life-giving, B, it's good side money, and C, it's just like I'm oddly good at it. And the irony of all of this is that we've done premarital counseling for a couple dozen couples, and I keep up with them on social media and stuff like that. No one has ever gotten divorced that I've done premarital counseling with. That, as weird as it sounds, my miserable failure of a first marriage like led to understanding where I was short, helping to communicate that to others and saying, I know what it feels like to be somebody who wants to fix, not listen, and you can't do that. I know what the warning signs are that I see in y'all, because, and again, it's not from a place of like, oh, I know because I read this in a book. It's, hey, I went down that hole. You really don't want to go down there. I promise you. But God's got something bigger and more awesome for you. And it allows you to do ministry out of vulnerability, and doing ministry out of vulnerability. And that's usually the best thing. I personally believe, if you hear a pastor who gives a really good sermon on a topic, that's a pastor who struggles with that topic. Because it's not just a book thing.
Yeah.
It is you're digging into their vulnerable soul.
Yes.
And it makes for a great message. And the same thing is true with me in premarital counseling. Like it's become my weakness has been redeemed, I think, and strengthened by God and people around me and the body of the church teaching to be one of the strengths of my ministry.
Yeah, that is beautiful. David, thank you so much for being with us today on New Perspectives. We have enjoyed having you with us, and I know that a new perspective on sort of a hard and dark season in your life, I think having a new perspective on that will help people do exactly what you're doing right now to shine light and ignite change. Thank you for your ministry and for what you do, and thank you for sharing with us today. We are so grateful. For those of you who joined, thank you so much for joining New Perspectives, and we'll see you right back here next week.